Hi, everyone. I am Lorianne. I am that gal from Milton, Ontario, and I'm with.
I am that guy. I'm Roy Miller from Dallas, Texas, and we want you to know how we see it.
So we're really excited today. We have a very special guest, Mark Breslin. He's the CEO of Yuck Yucks Comedy Clubs, and we've known each other for quite a few years. It's been a while since we've seen each other, but back when we did know, we were engaged more often. He was actually the chair of our Canadian Federation of Executive Entrepreneurs, because Mark was, and I would imagine still is, very much somebody who supports entrepreneurship. And this was particularly in Canada, and we were trying to support that. So we really appreciate your time on that. And he is here just for us to get to know Mark Breslin a little bit better. It's been 44 years since he's had this Yuck Yucks comedy chain, and I've been to a few of them. Let me tell you, they're absolutely awesome. So Mark, thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. It's nice to be on.
Great.
So Roy, you usually start with the first question because I know Mark better than
actually, I actually have a couple.
Sure.
So Mark, when you first started, I'm sure you probably wanted to, but did you have any idea that you would have had the success you had when you first started?
None. I had no idea what I was doing. That's why I did it. If I really knew what I was doing, I would never have done it. Fools rush in where, angels fear to tread. So what I was doing, I was right out of university. I had a degree in English literature, which means I could probably work for any taxi company anywhere in the world. It wasn't really something that was very practical. But those were the 70s. They were an impractical time, and it was all right to be impractical. So I got a job at a place called Harbourfront in Toronto, which was a place on the lake that the federal government had bought for billions of dollars, and they were going to develop it, which they did eventually, into a place where the public can come down, and there's restaurants and all kinds of things down there, theaters and stuff. But it was just warehouses when I got the job. And all I had to do was hand out pamphlets and wear a really ugly powder blue leisure suit, along with 11 other people. And what they found out, the people who were running this place, was that I was kind of an expert on entertainment in Toronto, because I've always been a guy who'd gone out to everything. Every night of the week, I was at a play, I was at a concert, I was at a show. And so they started giving me more and more responsibilities. And when the summer was over, because it was only supposed to be a summer job, I did not have anything to do. I did not want to go to graduate school immediately, like most of my friends did. And they asked me if I wanted to stay on and sort of program the site for the next summer. And I said yes. And one of the many things that I did was I developed a comedy night. Now, this is 1976. And at that time, there was very little comedy being done in the way that we know it as modern comedy. But there was a nascent group of comics that were starting to become interested to do what I would think of as relevant, uncensored personal comedy that had already been done in the States a bit, but not in Canada. So I started running those comedy nights, and I started doing some comedy myself. And at the end of 2 years, when my contract was over, I just started a place one night a week in the basement of a community center. And I called it Yuck Yucks because I felt that maybe once in a while the comedy was funny, but most of the time it really wasn't, because I was really dealing with rank amateurs. And the whole thing just grew. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. 2 years later, 1978, I opened up my first full-time club. Well, the full-time club was not what I would call a business. It was kind of a place to meet girls and a place to hang out. It was so not a business that I didn't even have a bank account. I had a shoebox. And I have to tell you, I have small feet. So it was a really small shoebox. And I would stuff it with bills. And when somebody had to be paid, I would just take money out of the shoebox and pay them. So they were very, very modest. They couldn't be more modest of circumstances to which I started. But what I didn't realize was that how much I was going to love this. And I also didn't realize that comedy was going to be something that was going to become very big. I did not know people congratulate me that I could see the future and I was ahead of my time. But really, I just wanted to have fun.
Okay, so are you responsible? I mean, how can I phrase this? Were there any comedians that from your club really got propelled into fame?
Yes, many. And many from the first years, as a matter of fact. Jim Carrey being probably the one that everybody knows the best. Howie Mandel was from that era. But then there are other people later on like Russell Peters, who's an enormous, probably one of the most biggest live stars in the world, Norm Macdonald, Harlan Williams, Jeremy Hotz. These are all, well-known people. Tom Green.
Oh, I was going to ask you about Russell Peters since he's from Canada. I wondered about if he was maybe played at your club.
Oh yeah, he started at Yuck Yucks along with all the people that I mentioned, and it's funny because in the beginning, we also act as agents for these people too. We couldn't sell them to anybody. Nobody was interested, and I remember he got a shot at Just for Laughs early on, and I had friends who were big agents in the States, and I said, look, you got to go see this guy. He's fantastic. He's going to be big. So they went to see him, and they came back, and they said, well, yeah, he was funny, but we don't know what to do with him. He's not black. He's not white. Well, we don't know what to do with him. He's not Mexican. And so they passed on him. And, of course, they made an enormous mistake. And years later, of course, they told me they made an enormous mistake.
Yeah. I like Russell Peters. And he's always talking about, yeah, I'm Indian, but I'm Canadian. I was born in the States.
Yeah.
I mean, in Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were talking about, too, how this pandemic has affected the comedy clubs.
Well, it's eviscerated us, to be honest. I mean, comedy is something that needs an audience to fulfill its destiny. You can be a visual artist, you can paint in your garret, and you can put the painting online and everyone can appreciate it. You can be a musician, you can play a song, you can put it online, everybody can appreciate it and maybe buy it. But you can't do that with comedy. We've tried all kinds of Zoom shows, and let me tell you, nobody wants to do Zoom shows. You're speaking into the ether, and it's very frustrating for comics. And you can tell that nobody really wants to do Zoom shows because no big comic is doing Zoom shows. It's only amateurs and comics who are club comics who are just desperate to perform. We did a show last week in Ottawa at a drive-in concert because that was allowed. You could be in your car. You could hear it through, you tune in through through your FM radio and you hear it, and you could see the comic being projected on the big screen. Sounds great, except that the comic can't hear the people laugh because you're boxed into your car. So what they do is instead of laughing, they honk the horn, which makes you feel like you're in the movie Cars 2. It's these things are, again, they're desperate because comics need to perform. It isn't even the money, because there isn't that much money in doing a show in a drive-in movie. But our clubs in Alberta, because every province determines what you can do and what you can't do, Alberta has opened up more than any place else. And so our 2 clubs in Alberta just reopened. But with such rules about being 6 feet away from everybody, so you can only have about a third of the seats sold, it makes it very difficult to break even or let alone make a profit. And yet people are loving being there because they're just so tired of sitting inside.
Yeah.
For sure. And they need the comedy right now. That's one of the most important things because there's
well, here's what we learned from the few shows we've done. Don't talk about COVID because nobody wants to hear it. And don't talk about Donald Trump because nobody wants to hear it. They're coming to the clubs to get away from all that stuff.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. So with the opening of patios, is that going to be able to generate, I know you're saying still that it's still going to limit the amount of people out there, but I know in Ontario, we're actually starting to have the patios open up.
Well, what it means is, we're probably only a month and a half away from being able to let people inside do things with social distancing and all kinds of other rules. The wait staff have to wear masks and all that kind of thing. Although we've actually created masks. Wait, I have one here. Let me show you.
Yeah.
Oh, this ought to be good.
I know, right?
Go yuck yourself.
That's perfect. That's perfect.
So there's all kinds of protocols, and it's okay in a comedy club. You see, theaters are more difficult because A theatrical presentation usually has an intermission, and that's when everybody runs to the bathroom at the same time, and that's really hard to control. But because we're kind of an ongoing show, it's 90 minutes, 105 minutes, you kind of get up and leave to go to the bathroom whenever you want. It's less dangerous because it won't have a march on the bathroom. So things like that make a difference. The other things that make a difference, music clubs are going to be really slow to open up because people don't sit and watch a band. They're standing with a drink in their hands and they're rubbing up against people, which of course is horrible for this virus. So at least comedy clubs, you sit in a seat, in an assigned seat, and you sit there, you watch the show is over, you leave. So that's helped us. Those kinds of things will help us. But the patio situation doesn't help us particularly for comedy because no patio is big enough to do comedy on. Not really. They're, 25 seats.
Yeah, that's true.
And there's noise abatement laws, so you can't really have entertainment outside anyway.
So Mark, since you started in the 70s to now, how has comedy changed in that span? What would you say?
Well, that's a good question. The business has certainly changed amazingly. It used to be that, comics, people would come, they'd be aspiring comics, they'd show up at my door, and it would be very clear that they were, let's just say, very marginal individuals. They might be really funny, but they're really marginal individuals. Now, comics show up with a briefcase and a 5-year plan, and they treat it like a business, because it is a business. If you go to Just for Laughs, and you hang out afterwards with the comics in the hotel, bar, you would never think that you were at a place where comics were. You would think you were at an insurance executive, colloquium or something, or convention, because the comics, it's all business now. It's very businesslike. How has the comedy changed itself? Well, comedy changed radically when I first got into the business, because before it used to be people getting on stage telling jokes, and the jokes weren't necessarily jokes written by those comics. It's the same thing that happened around the time of the British invasion in pop music, where it was just considered bad form to sing somebody else's material. It was supposed to be authentic. You were supposed to be your own self, and you're supposed to be singing about what you believed in. And the same thing has happened with comedy. You would find it very, very, very unusual to find a comic who would be doing material written by other people. So you're right, you're writing personal things, and that was a huge change. The second big change in the 70s, which has still lasted, is that it's become uncensored. People will use every word and every idea possible that you could think of, and many you haven't, to get an audience to laugh. The audience has become incredibly tolerant of all kinds of stuff. I'm going to give a counterexample to that in a moment. And the third thing that's happened is the decline of the dependence on things like network television, which just doesn't seem to mean as much now. You've got cable, you've got streaming, you've got the internet. You can basically do what you want. And that's a big, big sea change. Now, against that, I've watched this cycle of political correctness versus complete freedom versus political correctness versus freedom. I remember in the mid-'80s, I booked Sam Kinison and Andrew Dice Clay into my clubs, and I had pickets. And then that seemed to go away for a while. And now there's another wave of political correctness and cancel culture, and that's happening again. I haven't been picketed because, well, we're not open. But I assure you, when we open, there'll be pickets. Just before we closed down, I booked Louis C.K., and you know how controversial a move that was. I was the first person to book Louis C.K. Anywhere. And then after that, things started to open up for him. But I felt that a person's worth is not equal to their worst act. It's a kind of a spiritual issue to me. So, and he's a genius. I'm not sure I'd be so open to booking somebody with, a lot of political baggage if they weren't a genius, but he's a genius. So I did it. I took my lumps, but you know what? On social media, people were congratulating me as opposed to criticizing me about 20 or 30 to 1. So I feel I made the right decision. We sold out 4,000 seats in 40 minutes. We've never had that happen ever. And I could have sold more.
Wow.
Well, that's pretty incredible.
So we've always had, and this has always been my personal sort of position in the marketplace, we've always had a stand of complete non-censorship. We feel the audience censors. The audience censors by laughing or not laughing. The audience censors by either coming or not coming. And I think in the long run, we've chosen the right path.
And here's
Also, if you ever saw my act back in the 70s and 80s, you'd understand why we had a policy of non-censorship.
Fun fact though, back when I was at the Enterprise Center, I hired one of your comedians to come in, and he was so funny, my stomach hurt, and unfortunately I don't have his name right now, but when he came in, very professional, and asked me, is there a certain tone here that I need to have? I thought that that was really professional. He actually didn't use swear words, although maybe one or two, which of course people don't really get offended, but he was still super funny. So to me, as far as I'm concerned, that's talent, when you can actually, turn that around.
And what is appropriate in a nightclub is not necessarily appropriate at a corporate event, is not necessarily appropriate at a church. I mean, we sell comics to all kinds of different places, and some comics can't make the transition, and that's perfectly fine. But some can, and some are just clean anyway. People think that I only like comedy if it's dirty or edgy, and that's not true. I love Sam Kinison. I love Jerry Seinfeld. I don't see why I can't love both.
Oh, absolutely. That was really interesting.
So, excuse me. So as an entrepreneur, what is in comedy clubs in general, what's the competition like for comedy clubs?
Well, I'm not really sure what you mean by the words "in general."
So what I meant, like, say your club up against XYZ club in the States, versus East Coast, West Coast, Canada, US.
Well, these clubs are all local markets. So the only competition that anybody really has is in their own local market. And the competition isn't really so much with other comedy clubs. The competition is with other things that you can do. Movies are our competition. Parks are our competition in the summer. Patios are our competition in the summer. Sitting at home on your butt watching Netflix is our competition. So that's how we see it. Anything that you could be doing except going to a comedy club is our competition. Our competition isn't specifically other comedy clubs. There aren't that many of them anyway.
Yeah, okay, makes sense. Yeah.
How many in total do you have across Canada?
There's 14 currently on hiatus but operating. And that comes and goes. They're kind of like oil wells. You dig a hole, they gush for a while, then they stop gushing. You close it up and you find another hole.
But the original one in Toronto is still there.
Well, the original one was on Bay Street in Yorkville, and that's been closed for quite a while because we chased the neighborhood that's sort of hot and happening. So for a while that was Yorkville. Then we moved up to Yonge and Eglinton. Now we're down in the Club District on Richmond Street. And we've been there since 2002.
Oh, okay. So that would have been the one that I went to for my 40th birthday. There we go, because I was there for your 40th birthday.
Yeah, it's a nice club. We actually used real designers to design it and everything. And it's funny because 15 or 18 years later, it still looks good. It's still a good looking club. It's held up over the years, which is great. But comedy clubs aren't particularly fancy anyway. You're not supposed to do anything in a club that would take away from, what you see on stage. So really what you're building when you build a comedy club it's what you take out, not what you put in. You want to make sure that the sight lines are perfect, so no pillars. You want to make sure that there's no distraction, no disco balls, nobody playing the game on a big screen TV. You don't want blender drinks because you don't want the sound to get interfered with. They're quite plain, nice brick wall at the back with a big logo, illuminated logo, and around on the sides of the walls, 8x10s or framed articles about the club. But that's it. You don't want anything too fancy. And you want the chairs to be kind of uncomfortable.
Yeah, I
if you're
noticed
comfortable, you're doing this, you're sitting back. What you want is for people to lean forward, and you want them on edge, because that's the best way that comedy works. You also want them jammed in as much as possible and as close to the stage as possible. And of course, you can see why COVID is a problem for that, and will be for a while. But, you know, laugh and the world laughs with you. So you want people around you. There's nothing like being in a room of complete and total strangers, and everybody's laughing at the same thing. It's an amazing communal experience.
that it is. I completely agree. I just so enjoyed my time. I've been to a few of the shows, and it's just, you come out with your stomach hurting because you're laughing so hard. And then of course,
That's the food we sell.
That's
You know, I have tried in all my clubs to upgrade the food to healthy food, and people just don't want it. They want fried carbs, and that's okay. That's what they want. That's what we will give them. But I have tried over and over and over again to put healthy options on. Oh, how about our veggie platter? No. I'll take some fried this and a fried that, and make sure you put some extra fried stuff on it.
Sounds like Texas.
Very much like Texas. I've only been to Texas once, and that was Austin. And that was Austin, so it doesn't count.
Oh yeah, well yeah, that's the liberal center of Texas. Yeah.
I know.
So, in your experience, is there any one particular moment that a comedian was in your club that you really just always go back to and think about?
Well, when we booked Sam Kinison, nobody knew about him, and it was a revelation for the audience to see that kind of power and that kind of narrative command. He was terrible the first time we booked him. Terrible. He walked the audience. In fact, and Norm Macdonald has this story in his book, although he got salient detail wrong. We booked him the first time because I went down to Los Angeles, as I did in those days periodically, to find headliners. This was before the internet. You couldn't really do research that way. You had to actually be in the room, and the people from the Comedy Store would put on their 10 hot acts, and I would pick one or two, and I'd fly them in. Well, at the end of one of these shows, the manager came up to me and said, okay, that's the end of the showcase, but there's one last guy. We put him on because he clears the house and we can get everybody's bill paid and we can all go home. He said, you don't have to stay for that. I said, you know, it's insulting. I'm not going to walk out. So I watched this guy, and it's Sam Kinison, and he starts by breaking a chair. And then he starts screaming about his marriage and his divorce. And I thought, this guy's a genius. Nobody's laughing, but I'm laughing. So they come up to me afterwards, the people from the Comedy Store, and they said, well, so did you see anybody you want to book? I said, yeah, the last guy. And they said, oh yeah, his airplane material is fantastic. I said, no, not him, the actual last guy. And they went, you want to book Sam Kinison? And I said, yeah, I do. Okay. So I brought him in, and it was too early. He wasn't ready yet, but I saw something there. So we put him on, and he started on a Wednesday. The Wednesday wasn't very good. The Thursday, it was a packed house, and he walked every single person in the audience. I mean, everybody. There wasn't one person left by the time he was finished his show. So I went backstage, and I took out my wallet, and I took out $100. And I went to give it to him, and he probably thought, oh, I'm being fired, and he's giving me my $100 for the night, and he's going to fire me and send me home. I said, Sam, this is an extra $100 bonus for you, and I will give you another $100 every time this week you can completely clear the audience. But you've got to completely clear them, or else you don't get your extra $100. And he was flabbergasted. Now, the way Norm Macdonald tells the story, it was $1,000. Okay, so I'm not an idiot, you know. So anyway, he did not clear the audience the rest of the week, but he didn't do well either. The next time I brought him in, it was way better. There were no walkouts. And the third time I brought him in, there were standing ovations. So sometimes I get it right.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, really.
$100.
But not $1,000.
What year was that? Do you remember?
Yeah, probably would have been 83.
Oh well, it might have seemed like $1,000 to Sam.
I know. $100 was actually worth something then. Now I give it to my kid so he can go buy some candy.
Yes, and congratulations on that. Because how old is your child now? Because
He's 9.
9?
He's 9. And just to put this into some perspective for your listeners, I'm 68. So, and this is my first child. So it's pretty weird and unusual, I guess. But, you know, my father was 53 when I was born.
Oh, wow.
So there's some kind of thing. And my nephew, who's only 7 years younger than me, just had his child, and he was 55. I guess it's a family trait.
Bet you weren't even expecting this to happen, but that's wonderful. When you told me the news, I was really excited for you. I'm like, yay!
It's good. I really love being a dad to him. He's a good child for me to have because I'm not very sporty. Neither is he. He's kind of eccentric and arty, and it's a good match. It's a really good match.
That's fantastic.
That's great.
So, Roy, do you have any more questions for Mark?
No, not really. But I really sure enjoyed. I enjoyed your insights into the comedy business. I'll tell you for sure.
Great, Roy. Thank you.
Absolutely, and absolutely wonderful to see you again, Mark. Thank you so much for being here.
Nice to see you too, Lorianne. It's too bad it's on a computer screen, but that's the world we live in right now.
Yeah, well, we'll keep in touch, and who knows, we might end up. I'll just quickly say something fun. When Mark and I, back when we were working together on this project, we went for lunch a couple of times. I still remember when you got up, and in the middle of our lunch, you just got up and started doing comedy in the hallway, and people are looking at me and I'm going, that's Mark.
All right,
yeah,
well.
It was so funny. Oh my goodness.
Glad you remembered.
I do. That was excellent. All right.
Okay.
Well,
all right.
We're going to let you go. Thank you very much. And
Thank
again,
you.
I am that gal with.
I am that guy. We really appreciate your time, Mark.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Okay. Take care.
Okay. Bye.